Drew here, and the season 2 finale of C, Rockabye. I felt that this episode, it was entertaining, to be sure, but when it comes to the future of the show, I don't feel like it gave us a lot to look forward to, at least from my perspective. The things that were teased just weren't that interesting and didn't really shake up the status quo that much. But the main thing this episode, obviously this episode leaned really hard into the battle. And, that's not a weakness really of the show. A lot of shows build up to the final battle at the end of the season. Game of Thrones did this basically every season after season 4. From season 4 on, every season built towards a battle, and that was supposed to leave the audience satisfied until the next season. And that obviously doesn't always work, but it's not a bad strategy. So this season, I wasn't able to review the last 2 episodes, but not a ton happened in them. They were mainly building up into this confrontation between the Trevantians, led by Idovos, and the army of Pensa, who are being led somehow by Babavos. And this battle, it started out looking like it was going to be this frenetic, really chaotic affair, and it was at times. But for a lot of it, to me, it kind of felt like one of those video games where you feel like you're exploring this big, wide open world, but then you realize you're kind of stuck on this very narrow path, and you can't really move around that much. And there's a very narrow set of parameters through which things can happen. So there were a lot of cliches this battle. Like, I was always entertained by it. The people doing this show, they know how to do a really well executed action scene from a choreography perspective. And there were a lot of these shots where it was done well, because I think when you do like continuous shot like 1917, at some point it starts to be less meaningful than just kind of monotonous. But it was done well here, where there were a lot of really long takes, but they were integrated in such a way that you didn't really get fixated on, oh, how long has this take been going on? Has it been going on for over a minute? Have they cut lately? You weren't thinking about it because they were doing it in such a way that it didn't overwhelm the actual storyline being portrayed in the battle. There was a lot of the stuff that you see in pretty much every movie battle going on. You have multiple times where Babavos and the others lead the Trevantian army into these traps. First, there's, the fire. It was kind of funny when Babavos finally lit it. I was like, wait, Tamakti Jun is out there. You can't just light it. And somehow Tamakti Jun managed to jump out of the flames in time, but it really seemed like he should have been roasted if all those other dudes were roasted. But otherwise, they also had the gate, which they brought crashing down to kill all these people. Another, I've lost track of the amount of times in this show where Babavos will pull something down or cut something or have some booby trap set up that will just take out a horde of soldiers. And then lastly, of course, there was the rock that he pulled down onto the ice. At first, I was confused when he started pulling his armor off and preparing to do something. I was like, what's he going to do? Is he going to try to rush Idovos? I don't understand his plan here. I thought it was a spontaneous decision at first, but once it turned out that he was going to pull down that rock and it was all part of the plan, and Bowlion blew the horn and everybody started climbing up, it made a lot more sense. But I still don't understand, how did they have time to set all this up? I don't think there was enough time to have all this planned based on what we've been shown in the show. So again, all these things, I don't know that these strategies would really work in combat, or they would have been implemented a lot more than they have been historically speaking. I don't really think that's how ice works either. Generally speaking, I think if you drop a big heavy object into one section of ice, it doesn't break up a whole lake, it just breaks up that specific section. But this was magical ice, and the whole ice, all the ice under the Trevantians' feet got broken up. So to me, this was a little bit cliched. You also had the berserker thing going on, where the bad, all the good guys are killing tons of bad guys and coming out unscathed for the most part. And then you've got Idovos just killing people all over the place, and he didn't really seem to have much skill from my perspective. He just kind of seemed to just drive his sword into people and just keep pushing forward. But, you know, like he's killing tons of people, and Ren is killing tons of people. Bowlion and the different tribes showing up at the last second to bolster the army of Pensa, another kind of cliche. Unexpected troops to the rescue. There was one moment in the battle when all of the main characters in the good guys' army crawled up onto the rocks and left the army of the Trevantians out on the ice, and the guys are all just swinging around and looking in every direction. And it struck me at that moment how unrealistic the fighting in sea is, because you're having these battles and it's just this mass frenetic melee where people are just striking everywhere around them. And somehow, despite being blind, they know exactly who to swing at and who not to swing at. And in reality, you know, in combat situations, people who have their full senses are completely disoriented and shoot their own men at times, you know. So how are people who don't have their sight going to have the precision of hearing to be able to differentiate between friend and foe once the battle reaches this level of intensity? I just don't think they could. I think it's completely unrealistic, even with their honed senses after years of not having, you know, after so many years of not having sight. I just don't think it's possible that you'd be able to fight effectively in this way without killing your own people. So again, I'm not going to nitpick on that because, you know, you kind of have to accept that with this show in general. I was frustrated by the way that the relationship between Ren and Haniwa played out. I feel like if Ren had been a male character, they would have killed her. But I think that they were afraid of going into some tropes that offend people by killing the character of Ren and, you know, leaving Haniwa without her female lover. So they intentionally avoided that. But to me, it was like if she had been a man, I think they would have killed her because it was so unrealistic and ridiculous that Ren didn't end up dead, especially when she fell into the ice water wearing armor, was sinking to the bottom, and somehow she manages to swim back up to the surface. Well, why did she sink? Was it because of the armor she was wearing? Did she take her armor off? What changed that she was able to get back up to the surface? And literally, we don't see any other soldiers getting back up to the surface. It's like the rules that apply to the henchmen do not apply to Ren. So to me, just kill her, please. She's not, I mean, I like the actress. I feel like Eden Epstein has brought a welcome characterization to this series, but I just don't think that having her live, I think it hurts the realism of the show in such a way that it makes it hard to keep watching. The death of Toad. I have a theory about this. I have a theory that because Paris, they had apparently already decided to kill her off as well because she was no longer going to be in the show. They didn't really see any point to Toad's character without Alfre Woodard's Paris being in the show. So I feel like they decided to kill him potentially for that reason. I really liked this character. I thought his line delivery was great, and I thought he brought a welcome dynamic with Kofun. But I liked the way that this death played out, because you had to have somebody die in a battle like this intense. And I liked that it wasn't like a heroic moment or this, moment where he was doing an intentional act of self-sacrifice. He just got stabbed randomly in the middle of a frenetic fight. And that's how most people die in real combat. They don't get killed in some heroic sacrifice. They just, everybody is susceptible to a blade. So I thought that that was well done. I think that the final fight between Ito and Baba, it was well choreographed. Obviously, they, for some reason, decided to do it without their swords. Probably because these are two such physically powerful men. They thought, hey, we can get in some wrestling moves and choreography, and it'll be pretty cool. And it was. The choreography was great, and you could see just the power of these two men, and it was very well done fight. But to me, I feel like the character of Ito Voss ended up feeling like a waste, because I kept thinking this season, oh wow, Dave Bautista is super intimidating and he seems to really care about Ren and about his soldiers, and we know that he was abused as a child. I can't wait to learn more about him, because it seems like there are pieces there of a compelling character. And they just never quite gave him, I thought, they needed like a more intensive period where we got to see him and learn about him. I was actually kind of hoping, after it became apparent that the Trevantians were going to lose this battle, that his character would survive and have a role in continuing seasons, because I didn't feel like we learned as much about him as I would have been interested in learning. But nope, he's dead. I thought that the final moment between him and Baba, it did add a little bit of depth to the character, but I just feel like we could have learned so much more about him. Otherwise, as I said, I mean, like, looking forward to future seasons, I'm not sure that I would come back. They're going to have to do a lot of work, because I feel like if they're just going to bring in more villains to replace the ones that, you know, died this season, I'm just not that interested in that. Like, I don't think they've set up anyone new as an interesting villain. I'm so done with Queen Kane. The scene where she killed Paris was so annoying. It's, you know, Paris would be on her guard. She would see that coming. She's not stupid. But, you know, again, I theorized maybe Alfre Woodard, she's such a talented actress. Maybe she wanted her own show. So maybe that's why they killed her off in this fashion. I feel like they were looking to have like Game of Thrones character deaths all season long, or, you know, just shocking character deaths that would become water cooler moments. But this is not the way to kill a character, because it was utterly purposeless. The only thing I could say that was kind of interesting about it was the fact that Paris was directly responsible for them not killing Queen Kate. So she kind of set herself up to die, which is kind of interesting. But I just, man, it felt like a waste of Alfre Woodard's character. But she's such a great actress. She deserves her own show. She should be the head of her own show somewhere, or the head of her own movie. If Clemency had been better received, I think she could have been an Oscar nominee for that role. She was so good. So I'm sad to see her leave the show, but I hope she's on to better things. Baba Voss's decision to just head off at the end of this episode, I guess you could say it was built up to, but I don't think there was enough build up to this, and it really doesn't fit with my understanding of his character. I feel like it's manufacturing drama. He's obviously going to come back, but, you know, you've literally got Lord Harlan telling him the war's not over, you could be a good soldier, we're going to need you, and then he leaves his family. Baba Voss would never do that. He is the protector of his family. He will always be there for them, and he knows a war is coming. And it's not like people were like pushing him away. You know, Magra was very clear that we need you more than you think. So to me, this just came out of left field, and I feel like it was just their way of getting a cliffhanger out of this ending. Otherwise, though, like I said, there's a small tease of the fact that one of Gerald Morel's children has discovered how to use gunpowder, and that means there'll be explosions in this world. But how is that really different from, you know, a bus that comes crashing down and wipes out a bunch of people with crossbows? Or how is it that different from, you know, setting a bunch of people on fire with pitch and whatever that was that they had in those bags that they were cutting loose and lit them up with? I mean, how is this really going to drastically alter the state of affairs when it comes to warfare? I don't see that it does. And as I said, no one's really set up to be a good villain. I mean, I'm so done with Queen Kane. I would love it if next season would just open with her dying in childbirth. Then we could just be done with this stupid character. Lord Harlan, you know, he has potential to be what Littlefinger should have been in Game of Thrones, because he's like a schemer and he has all the best lines and he's really charming, but he is in it for himself, and you could really see him betraying the characters at some point, and that could bring out a really interesting role for him. But they haven't carved that role out yet, and I think I would have liked to see more hints of that at the end of this season, rather than leaving on this note where he's still kind of with them in Pensa on their side. So I just don't think they set up enough for a third season for me to be excited. I think a better show would have kind of had this battle, resolved some things, but also had some plot threads that we could be excited about in season 3. And I don't really think that they did. But those are just my thoughts for what they are worth. If you're interested in seeing my upcoming reviews of other shows on this channel, please consider subscribing. And as always, thanks for watching.